My name's Nate, I'm 29, and until a few months ago, I was the golden child, at least on paper. Steady job, no criminal record, co-signer on the house my parents live in, and the only one in the family who actually paid bills on time. I'm not saying I'm a saint, but compared to my older brother Adam, who once tried to write off poker losses as business investments, I was the responsible one. My parents, though, they never really saw it that way. Or maybe they did and just resented it. Either way, what started as me helping the family eventually turned into me being the family ATM with zero emotional return. The voicemail came on a Wednesday morning. I was running late for work, had just spilled coffee on my shirt, and was debating whether I had enough time to turn around and change when I saw the notification light blinking on my phone. I tapped the icon and hit play on speaker while juggling my keys. "You're out of the will," my dad's voice said, cold and clipped like he was reading from a legal memo. "Don't bother coming back. You made your choice." I stood there in the parking lot, dumbfounded. That was it. No context, no explanation. Just a digital boot to the chest. I stared at my phone like it might cough up the missing pieces of the puzzle. Then I did what I always do when I get blindsided. I went numb. Texted back 2 words, "Got it," and went to work like nothing happened. It wasn't until later that night, sitting alone in my apartment with a microwave dinner I didn't even taste, that the shock started to fade and the anger kicked in. I replayed the voicemail. Again and again. Each time, it stung less and ticked me off more. Because I knew exactly where this was coming from. It was Adam. For years, he'd been the prodigal son in a constant state of return. He'd blow through jobs, girlfriends, and excuses like gas money. My parents always bailed him out. When he borrowed $12,000 from me to cover legal fees, read Vegas debt, I never saw a cent back. When I confronted him, he told me I should be grateful he came to me first instead of some loan shark. Like I was supposed to be honored. But this was new, cutting me out of the will. After I'd co-signed their mortgage, bailed them out of foreclosure twice, and paid the property taxes for 3 straight years when my dad forgot. That wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a declaration of war. The next morning, I called my bank. Then I called my attorney. I didn't yell. I didn't even vent. I just moved, calm and methodical. It's amazing what you can do when you stop expecting people to treat you with decency. Apparently, my dad forgot that while he and my mom technically owned the house, the loan was in both our names. And without my signature, that $290,000 weight hanging over their heads was about to become a whole lot heavier. The first domino fell 48 hours later. I got the first call at 6:17 a.m. An unknown number. I let go to voicemail. The next came at 6:22, then 6:28. By 9 a.m., I had 71 missed calls, most from my mom, a few from Adam, and one from a number that belonged to a local real estate law firm. I listened to one voicemail, just one. My dad, panicked, voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "Nate, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to stop. Now, this isn't funny. We could lose the house." I didn't respond. I just stared out the window, coffee in hand, heart still. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to be clear. You don't burn bridges with the only person holding up the structure and expect to keep your view. That afternoon, my cousin Jenna texted me a photo. She lives 3 blocks down from my parents and passes their house on her way to work. The picture showed a big white and blue "for sale" sign in the front yard. My name was still on the deed, but the bank had been informed. They were moving fast, faster than I expected. By 5 p.m., their lawyer had emailed me directly. The subject line read, "Urgent, property status and legal options." In the body, one line stuck out. "Why would you do this?" I didn't reply. But that's the thing. It wasn't a sudden decision. It wasn't spite. It was years of being the one who showed up, who gave, who kept everything running while being treated like a backup plan. And they'd finally pushed too far. The part that hurts the most isn't the house. It's not the will, either. It's that I genuinely believed, right up until that voicemail, that somehow I mattered more to them than what I could provide. But when they thought I was no longer necessary, they didn't even hesitate to cut me out. Now they understand just how necessary I was. And the thing is, this isn't even the worst of it. Because what I've done so far, that's just the beginning. The mortgage removal was the first chess move. They still don't know what I did with the account that's been paying their utilities, or what I'm about to tell the IRS. But they will. Very, very soon. By Saturday morning, The panic had mutated into full-blown chaos. My phone buzzed every 5 minutes with new calls, voicemails, and increasingly desperate texts from my mom and dad. I ignored most of them, but one message from my brother caught my eye. It said, "Are you seriously going to mess over your own parents like this? After everything they've done for you?" I stared at that sentence for a long time. Everything they've done for you. I nearly laughed. What? Like kicking me out at 18 unless I paid rent and took over the Wi-Fi bill because Adam needed a few years to find himself? Or using my college fund to cover his DUI fines and then shrugging when I had to drop out halfway through my junior year? Right. Still, the gaslighting had always been their strongest weapon. Twist the narrative, make it sound like I was ungrateful. It was their favorite trick. But this time, I wasn't playing along. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the shared utility portal I'd set up 3 years ago, the one connected to the autopay card in my name. Water, power, gas, trash pickup. I paused each one manually, staring at the confirmation screens like I was sealing a vault. Click, pause, confirm, click, pause, confirm. By noon, a notification pinged on my phone. The electric company had processed the change. Then another, the gas suspension was active. I leaned back on my couch and exhaled, not out of satisfaction, but exhaustion. There's a strange kind of tired that comes with realizing you were never family, just funding. That afternoon, I got a knock on my apartment door. For a second, my heart jumped. Had they found where I lived? But it was just my downstairs neighbor, Mr. Callahan, asking if I wanted the rest of his pizza. I must have looked rough. I thanked him, smiled, and closed the door. Then I turned off my phone and let silence be my shield. The next day was Sunday. Normally, that meant family dinner. My parents had this passive-aggressive ritual. If I didn't show, I'd get texts like, "Hope you're okay," or "Guess you're too busy again." But this Sunday, it was radio silence. That is, until I turned my phone back on around 6 p.m. and found a message from an unknown number. "This is attorney Raymond Coulter, representing Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence. Please call me back as soon as possible regarding the property issue." I didn't call. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer with a note. "Keep an eye on this guy. They're getting nervous." Meanwhile, I began prepping what I knew would be the final blow. You see, my dad had a bad habit of listing me on things he didn't understand, just to make them go through faster. Case in point, a family trust account, with my name still listed as co-trustee. It had been dormant for a while, mostly serving as the funnel through which they handled a small business loan and declared nearly nothing in profits to avoid taxes. A few years back, I'd set up the trust structure for them, complete with tax ID and digital access. At the time, my dad didn't want to pay the accountant's fee, so I'd taken care of it myself, which meant I still had full administrative access. I checked the ledger. Red flags. Lots of transfers to Adam. Random consulting fees. And a few laughably fake vendor names that looked like they were pulled from a late-night infomercial. I documented everything, screen-capped each shady entry, and prepped a file for my lawyer. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I just wanted to be done being their doormat. But I knew the IRS wasn't as forgiving. Then came the part one hadn't prepared for. On Monday morning, my mom showed up at my job. I work in a mid-sized office. Nothing flashy, but enough foot traffic that a red-faced, teary woman marching into reception causes a stir. My coworker buzzed me and said, someone claiming to be your mom is asking for you." I almost said no. Almost. But some stupid part of me wanted to hear it. To hear her say it. Maybe, just maybe, she'd apologize. Tell me they made a mistake. That they missed me. That they realized Adam had manipulated them again. I stepped into the lobby, keeping my distance. She looked rough. Her hair was frizzed out. Her mascara was streaked down her cheeks, and she was gripping her purse like it held her last ounce of dignity. "Nate," she said, voice trembling. "Please, just come talk to us. Your father he's sick over this." "Sick?" I raised an eyebrow. He sounded just fine in the voicemail. "That was a mistake," she said quickly. "He didn't mean it. We were just angry." "Funny," I said, folding my arms. "I was angry too. For years. You just never noticed because I kept the lights on." Her lip quivered. "We didn't realize how much you'd done." "No," I said. "You did. You just didn't care. Because you thought I'd always keep doing it." She stepped forward like she might hug me, but I took a step back. "I'm not the same kid you could guilt into fixing everything," I said quietly. "And I'm done." That was the last thing I said before turning and walking away, leaving her alone in the lobby as the receptionist pretended not to stare. Back at my desk, I sat down, hands shaking a little. Not out of fear, not even from the confrontation, but from the finality of it. I'd spent years trying to be the good son, the responsible one, the fallback plan. And now, for the first time in my life, I was letting it all burn. But the fire wasn't finished yet, because by the end of the week, they were going to learn what happens when the foundation they stood on gets pulled out from under them, brick by financial brick. By Tuesday, the silence shifted from desperate to dangerous. Not the kind where people stop calling because they've given up, but the kind where they're plotting, regrouping. I knew that silence. It's the same kind my dad used to fall into right before making a power move, usually one that backfired spectacularly and cost me another $1,000 to clean up. So I braced myself. Sure enough, Wednesday morning started with an email. Not from them directly, of course. That would be too humble. It came from a mediation service downtown, one I vaguely recognized from a divorce settlement I'd once helped a friend through. Dear Nathaniel Lawrence, we have been contacted by parties wishing to resolve a financial dispute via third-party mediation. If you are willing to attend a preliminary session to discuss possible resolution terms, please respond to this email within 48 hours. No subject line, no signatures, just a sterile request dressed up as concern. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything they wanted to say to me now was 20 years too late. They had always treated me like a safety net. Reliable, invisible, and soft enough to absorb every blow. I'd get called when the water heater broke, when the car insurance lapsed, when Adam missed a payment on his fourth attempt at launching an e-commerce brand. But when I was hospitalized 3 winters ago for a collapsed lung, they didn't visit once. My mom sent a single "feel better soon" text. My dad forwarded a video of Adam's new apartment. I never forgot that. I had one last thread left to pull, something I'd been sitting on since this all started. A quiet ace I'd kept close to my chest, not because I was afraid to use it, but because I wanted to be sure I was ready to sever every last tie. Back when I first started handling my parents' finances, I convinced them to create a digital vault for security. It housed everything: insurance policies, bank account access, digital logins, copies of tax filings. They were lazy. I was thorough. Over time, they stopped keeping track of what was in there. It became my job to manage it. And one folder was labeled plainly, IRS Backlog. Just seeing the name again made my chest tighten. Inside that folder were years of ignored notices. Some had been opened and hastily scanned. Others were left untouched, complete with glowing red stamps. Immediate action required. My dad had told me it was just for reference, but the numbers didn't lie. Missed filings. Dubious deductions. At least 3 years where Adam had claimed business expenses while having 0 reported income. And guess whose name was accidentally listed on one of the filings as a secondary trustee? Mine. I could have let it slide. Could have kept playing the fixer. But I'd already been their scapegoat, their bank, their emotional punching bag. I wasn't going to be their legal fall guy too. So I sent one email. Just one. To a tax attorney I trusted. Attached the files. Subject line: urgent, potential liability, not my problem. Then I logged off. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine I'd been saving and sat on my balcony. The air was cool, and the street below buzzed with quiet traffic. I let the silence settle. Real silence this time, not the waiting kind. The peaceful kind. And it felt good. Strange, but good. Until the knock. It was just after 9 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I turned off the lights and approached the door slowly, instinctively checking the peephole. Adam, of course. He looked agitated. Sweaty. Wearing a wrinkled hoodie and holding his phone like it might explode. I watched him raise his hand to knock again, then hesitate, glance down the hallway, and finally mutter something I couldn't hear. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped back, crossed my arms, and waited. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text. I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. Please. I stood there, staring at it. The same guy who once told me, "You're just a bitter little side character in this family," now begging for 5 minutes. I gave him none. Eventually, I watched him storm off down the hallway, muttering curses into the air. The building door slammed behind him. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was unsure of my decision, but because I knew what was coming next. This wasn't just going to be about money anymore. This was about pride. Legacy. The illusion of control that my father had spent a lifetime trying to maintain. And now that I'd shattered it, I knew he wouldn't go quietly. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the IRS. An automatic acknowledgement. They'd received the documentation I submitted. And that, I knew, was the real beginning of the end. But the moment that truly changed everything, the one that let me know there was no going back, came 3 days later. Saturday afternoon. I was grocery shopping. Nothing dramatic, just eggs, bread, some orange juice. I was waiting in line when my phone buzzed again. A screenshot. Sent from Jenna, my cousin. It was a photo of my parents' front door. On it, taped crookedly, was a large yellow notice. Notice of federal tax lien. Property subject to seizure. I stopped cold in the middle of the store. Behind me, someone asked if I was in line. I barely heard them. I stood there, staring at the screen, heart pounding, not out of fear, but out of the surreal realization that, for the first time in my life, I had taken back all the power they'd drained from me. They made their choice. And now, finally, they were going to live with it. I didn't visit the house. Not when the lien notice was taped up. Not when the utility shut-off notices came. Not when Jenna messaged me 2 days later with a video of movers loading furniture into a rental truck under the gray eyes of a federal agent. I didn't need to be there. I had already lived in that house long enough, lived in it even when I didn't sleep there anymore. In every payment, every bailout, every time I'd opened my banking app and shifted money to cover another one of their messes. That was my real address for years. But not anymore. 3 weeks after the lien notice, their lawyer reached out again. This time, not with threats or vague, lawyerly or hoping for a resolution language. This time, it was raw. They've agreed to full financial separation. No contest. They're requesting that you rescind your IRS documentation in exchange for withdrawal of any claim on the family estate and a signed release of all shared accounts. I read that line 4 times. It was the first time in my life my parents acknowledged that I'd held the reins all along. But it didn't end there. The attached document had everything: notarized statements, copies of bank account closures, mortgage reassignment forms, full legal forfeiture of the family trust, and a formal renunciation of their own co-ownership on any financial structure we had shared. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who called me 10 minutes later. "You won," she said flatly. "This is their surrender." I should have felt triumphant. Some part of me did. But another part, the quiet part, the one that used to lie awake wondering what I did wrong to make my own family treat me like a backup plan, that part just felt tired. I signed the papers anyway. 2 days later, it was official. I was free. They weren't. The IRS doesn't care about family drama. It doesn't matter if you meant to fix it next year. The debt was real. The forged signatures, the shady deductions, the trust account payouts to Adam labeled as employee bonuses when he'd never lifted a finger in his life, all of it had consequences now. They tried to blame each other, of course. I heard through Jenna that Adam moved into a friend's basement to lay low. My dad apparently had a screaming match with my mom over the phone that ended in her tossing his phone into a storm drain. And their house? It was auctioned off 2 months later to pay down their owed taxes and penalties. Not the full amount, but enough for the government to release its grip. For now, they moved in with my aunt. Yes, the same one who once said I was too cold and should smile more after I paid for her daughter's hospital bill. Poetic. I heard she's charging them rent. Triple what I ever asked. Adam tried to call me once. Not from his number, he knew I'd blocked it, but from some unknown local number that I answered without thinking. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened. He didn't even try to apologize. Instead, he went straight into a monologue about how the IRS ruined their lives, how this wasn't how families are supposed to work, how I overreacted and burned down everything for no reason. When he paused, waiting for my response, I finally spoke. "You still don't get it, do you?" Silence. "You were the reason. All of you. Every single thing you got that I never did. Every time I swallowed it and paid the price. Every time I let myself believe you'd notice or say thank you, or at least stop blaming me for your own disasters." He started to interrupt, but I didn't let him. "I gave you years of silence. That was my mistake. You thought it meant obedience. It meant mercy. And I'm fresh out." I hung up, blocked the number, and finally, it felled over. In the months that followed, I changed everything. Closed the joint accounts. Got my own insurance. Paid off my share of the remaining student loans, one last trace of their legacy. Found a therapist, something I'd put off for years, and started unpacking the wreckage that I'd been calling family out of habit, not love. And little by little, I began living. I started traveling. Just small trips at first. A train to the coast, A flight to Denver to see an old friend I hadn't made time for in years. I got promoted at work, not because I was suddenly better, but because I had stopped dragging the weight of other people's choices around my neck. I even adopted a dog, a clumsy, floppy-eared golden retriever I named Milo. First creature in my life who wanted nothing from me but time and affection. I gave him both without hesitation. On Christmas, I got one more message from my mom. A single-line email. I hope one day you'll understand we did what we thought was best. No apology. No responsibility. Just a final nudge of guilt, like a rusted reflex she couldn't shut off. I didn't respond. I don't check that inbox anymore. Sometimes, when I walk through the park with Milo and see families gathered around picnic tables, I wonder what it might have been like having parents who showed up without strings, who didn't measure love by what you could provide or how well you played the role they wrote for you. But that feeling fades. Because now, I know something I didn't before. Family doesn't make you whole. Respect does. Boundaries do. And sometimes, the truest thing you can say to the people who raised you is, I owe you nothing. So that's my story. They told me I was out of the will. They never realized I was the will, the foundation, the paycheck, the life raft they poked holes in. And when I finally let go, they sank on their own. I didn't drown. I built something better on dry land. And for the first time in my life, I'm not holding anyone else above water but me.